So welcome everyone to u-nite, Unity Temple's weekly interspiritual service. I'm Rev Nhien, and I am just blessed and honored to be with you today. It's funny, I wasn't expecting that song twist, but it's so apropos because today's topic is the cloud of unknowing. And, just when you think you know something or know what to expect, it's not what you thought it was going to be. So really right on point for today. So this is an interspiritual service. What that means for us is that while we here in Unity are both historically and culturally grounded in the teachings of Jesus, teachings such as infinite, unconditional love, grace, and forgiveness, the teachings of Jesus rather than the teachings about Jesus, we actively embrace practices and principles from the world's religious and spiritual traditions, understanding that all of them have something to offer to teach us. So, again, today's topic is something I chose because it's really up for me in my life, the cloud of unknowing. I'm going to invite. So there's a famous Buddhist story about a Zen master named Nan-in. And this master one day received a very reputable scholar, a professor in the local area, and had him over for tea. I know many of you have heard this story before. So the master has the professor over for tea. They sit down together, and Nan-in, the master, starts pouring the professor's cup of tea. And as he pours, the cup fills. But then he keeps pouring, and the cup overflows. And the professor wants to be polite, but at one point he can't help himself, and he stops and he said, whoa, wait, stop. The cup is overflowing. And Nan-in looks at him and says, even as you seek Zen, as you want to learn, you must first empty your cup. Your cup is too full of your opinions and beliefs, he says. First, empty your cup, and then you will know Zen. In another Buddhist story from also the Zen tradition, there were two friends, one named Fayen and one named Dizang. And the two of them were standing together, and they knew that Fayen was about to go on a pilgrimage. And so his friend, Dizang, says, where are you going? And Fayen says, around on a pilgrimage. And Fayen says, what is a pilgrimage? And Dazing says, I don't know. And Fayen says, not knowing, that is the most intimate. So today, what I would like to explore together with you is this question of what do we know? What do we think we know? And what is our capacity for not knowing? And how does not knowing actually, how does an increased capacity for not knowing serve us on our life's pilgrimage, on our journey toward God, if you will, on our journey toward truth? And I say this, I share this from the perspective of a minister, because I think about how when I come up here to speak every Sunday, I have in my head this idea that people think I'm supposed to speak about what I know, right? Like to talk about what you know. And today it just struck me how probably deeper than that. It's important to talk about not knowing. It's important to talk about how in the course of our lives, if we dig deep into the truth of like what everyday life is like, the truth of existence isn't that the terrain that we're about to traverse in our lives is known terrain, right? Every day, even if we're going to the same job every day, you know, that famous line that says essentially, you may cross the same river, but it's not ever really the same river, right? We never cross the same river twice. The same moment never exists, even when we go to the same job. So there is something to this deep understanding of what it is like to live in the unknowing place and to traverse that. And so how do we journey with that together? That's what I'd like to explore here today with you. So we begin with this idea. Back in the Middle Ages, a Christian mystic, actually anonymous, a person who's not known, wrote a book called The Cloud of Unknowing. And somehow, this book became so important that it has endured throughout these years and substantially drives the work of Father Thomas Keating and other modern-day Christian mystics. And in this book, you see these patterns within all the wisdom traditions. The fundamental teaching within the book is the teaching about emptying ourselves of what we think we know. But in the Zen story, the reason I revisited this is when you go back to the story of the cup. I remember when I first heard that, I was like, yeah, I'm smart. You know, I had all this stuff where most of my life, like I had this body of knowledge and I think I know a lot of things. And so I can appreciate that there's a level to which before I can come into deeper knowing, you know, because sort of like to know spirit, to know God in a deeper way, certainly I have to empty myself of my ideas. But this writing, The Cloud of Unknowing, takes this process a little bit more deeply. It's this idea that we don't just let go of what we think we know. We let go even of the ways we come to know things, meaning we must be willing to release our power of reason, imagination, will, all these things that we normally think are what drive our life path and our life purpose. And so the invitation in this, he says, is in order to know experientially, in an embodied way, there must be a letting go of even the structure by which we think we come to know truth, life, or existence. So let's start with just the humanity of it all. I invite you to check in with yourself about where you land on the need to know, to be certain of things. Like, do you like surprise birthday parties or not? You know, I'm not one who usually does, you know? Like, I'm one who, like there's something that you're like out of control in a certain process, right? Do you really want to surprise me on this vacation? Or I'd like to know where we're going, please. You know, like there's this degree of certainty. And to the point where I remember, you know, when I was younger and trying to make decisions, and I would get tarot cards, and I would go to an astrologist, and I do all these things. And, you know, even though I, as a spiritual counselor and a director of sorts, when people come to me, there's no way I'm giving them advice and telling them about like their future and predicting it. But when I go to my spiritual director, all I want to do is have her tell me what I should do. You know, that there's something about wanting certainty in my life. You know, something about how just tell me, like, is this the better path? And if you just tell me, I'll do it. I'm really a hard worker and I'll do it, but I just want to know. You know, that I have this desire for certainty. And as many of you already know, as I've shared here, this past year of last spring, sitting in my apartment, in our townhouse, There is absolutely no way I would have predicted, sitting with my husband in our townhouse, there was absolutely no way that I would have predicted the life that I have today, that we would be divorced, that that I would be living in Missouri rather than Kansas. There was no way I would have predicted also, if you look at Unity Temple, just as a community, and you look at how long things have been here. I mean, Unity Temple on the plaza is an historic church, right? And so like Eden Alley had been here for years. Montessori had been here for years. There are these things that were within the structure that seemed like predictable and stable. And some of you may have already heard that both of those, like longtime renters, just recently are no longer with us. Like their lease ended and was not renewed. And so that's a lot of change to happen. And I don't know about you, when the more change that happens, the more you want to kind of find, okay, so what can I know, right? What can I know? And so in the midst of that, I found that for the last year, in particular, I've been clamoring for that. I found how there's so much loss of peace in the ways that we busy ourselves with the effort to make things predictable. You know, when we try to make things predictable, not only by querying people to try to find out, like, what's likely to happen, but we try to control situations, right? We could try to plan in advance so that we can kind of control and say, well, you know, if I know this, then I can like make this decision or that decision. And then I realized how much time, energy, mental exhaustion that I was facing in doing this. And in that process, as I prayed, what happened for me is, it's funny, the spiritual journey, how it really is not about acquiring more often, but about seeing what's already there. So there I was in prayer on all this. And what kept crossing my path was a deeper look at the contemplative practices from the Christian tradition. It just, wherever I looked, it popped up on my Facebook, on my emails, people were suggesting it to me. And contemplative practice is not a traditional unity sort of perspective. And so I found it curious that this kept coming up for me. But one thing is that centering prayer, which I've taught here, is actually from the contemplative tradition. And so as I probed into this, and this book kept coming up for me, The Cloud of Unknowing, what arose is this awareness that there's something deeper in this book that I haven't seen and in this teaching. And if I could sink into that there was more than, there was a way in which I even saw how my spiritual path was about, let me pray so that I can become certain, you know? So that and in this, it's like just throw it all out, Nhien. The message that repeats itself is this, just throw it all out. And I'm going to pause that storyline and go to just recently. I have a good friend who is very open, very interested and open in sort of my feedback and in my guidance around, you know, some behaviors he has that hurt him, that sabotage things, that are destructive. And just recently, we were spending time together, and all I had to do was give him this look. You know, I gave him this look, and he's like, I'm doing it again, aren't I? And one of his patterns is just moving too quickly, where it's like you expend extra energy, and you do something you don't need to do because you're just moving too quickly. So that's a pattern that he feels is hurting him. So all I did was take a look at him, and he said, I'm doing it again, right? And I said, yeah. He's like, you know, you can call me out anytime. And I laughed, and I said, okay, let's get to know. And he said, it's because I trust you. because I trust you. You can call me out. What does that mean? I realize that in life, when you trust someone, there's a way in which you're really open, right? You're open to them suggesting things that are way out of your comfort zone or wheelhouse. And what does it even mean when you trust somebody? Like, for me, what I had the sense of is that he trusted that I cared, right? He trusted my intention behind it. So, you could call me out because, there's a way in which when you want me to release something I'm doing, you're coming from a place of caring and love. As I reflected on that, I realized that's why people in my spiritual counseling sessions, they're willing to try on practices in their lives and release practices because they've come to trust me in a certain way. And in a way, I believe it's because they've come to trust my love. And so as I reflected on this, I thought about my greatest teacher. She's not my spiritual director. She's not any person. But I thought about God. Do I believe that I'm beloved of God? And if I do, why don't I trust that? Why don't I trust that what gets stripped away, what is being invited to be stripped away in my life, is right and good? Can I trust that? So as I sat with that, and I read more about this cloud of unknowing, it struck me that I was invited not to try to find more security and certainty in the world, but that in the midst of the inevitable uncertainty, and now almost like a radical uncertainty in my life, that in the midst of that sort of breakage of the outer semblance of security, that all the more was I to trust in my belovedness in God. And in that trust, really, 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 not just a little bit, but let go of everything I think I know. And not just what I think I know about who I am and what I'm supposed to do, but even the way I seek knowing. Even how I want to sit and journal and do a vision board and create ways in which maybe I could make my future something I could see. And the invitation time and time again in this book is no, Nhien. Let go of reason, let go of imagination, let go even of your will, and trust in God as love, God as this infinite ground of being. And in that kind of moment of realization, I realized, have you ever had this where you come to a place in your life and you realize how you have had your hand held all the time? That this centering prayer practice that would be so vital to me today was somehow given to me back in the year 2007. And it was like every step along the way, it was saying, practice this, use this. You don't even know why exactly yet. But it felt like this culmination of the perfection of how that practice got me to this point today where there's this moment where this prayer, this practice says, in the moment of going into the silence, you drop everything, and you come into first what they call the cloud of forgetting. Forget what you think you know. Forget who you think you are. And I got this in like the deepest way just recently. And as I was able to do that, it says when you drop into the cloud of forgetting, which is a willful forgetting, then you rise up into the cloud of unknowing. And I'm like, at first, unknowing, that sounds worse, but you rise up into the cloud of unknowing. But in this emptiness of you is where God abides. And as I felt that truth, and even this morning, as I sat and did centering prayer, I got it on a whole nother level. I've said this, I've taught it. What I really want isn't certainty. It isn't to know. Because it's just like if I knew that every moment my hand was being held in the hand of a beloved, I would know that it's all okay. My desire to know stems from a lot of this belief in self-reliance. That the more I know, the more I can figure out how to make things okay. But in that moment, it is as if the emptying of my hands, of my process, my striving, my future tripping, that in the holding of my hands like this, that even though I don't believe in a personified God, I could feel that sense of being held, of having my hand held, right? Of having my hands held. You are beloved of God. Why do you worry about your future, right? In every moment, figuratively, your hand is being held. But every moment, I can have this and then get out of meditation and be like, but I'm still going to try to figure it out. We got this oh. And in that moment, we do it again and again and again, this emptying. Felina Huritz is a modern-day teacher in the Christian mystical tradition. Centering prayer was brought to us by Father Thomas Keating, and Felina got to study directly under Father Thomas Keating himself. In her book, Mindful Silence, she talks about, the beauty of this journey, of my own kind of connection between emptying, trust, and love. And then I opened this book, yesterday, and I opened it to this new idea. How did I not know this? That what the contemplative path is deeply about is the path of opening to God's love. That's it. That's it. That in our emptying, we empty into love. Because I always think about, okay, it's a path of dying to your old self, but even in that, I have this, constant work of transformation that I want it to be about. But the transformation work is all about opening to God's love, opening to divine love, opening to know that, are you really okay? Is this really okay? Is this moment okay? Are you going to be held and okay? And I want to share a beautiful quote. I think I have it on a slide with her, where she reminds us of this. Simultaneously to burying our faculties in a cloud of forgetting is a rising of our naked love toward God in a cloud of unknowing. Love that is naked is stripped of reason, imagination, feelings, and will. And she also adds that the word contemplative derives from a root that means to set aside a place of worship or to reserve a cleared space in front of an altar. And so the approach she encourages us into is that of clearing, of not adding on. And so today, kind of in the spirit of this work, I normally speak a good 30 minutes and do this like 5-minute meditation. But today I'd like to invite us to do a longer time in the silence and journey together in a period of emptying, to really invite us in this space together to find a way in which Ram Dass said, all of us are just walking each other home. So we have a sense of how that can be with God, and we can have a sense of how that can be with each other. And so I'll invite us to imagine this. There are many different metaphors we can use. Some of you guys are into the ocean and water. There's the sailing of the ship, right? There's the way in which you let go of the shore, and then you journey into the ocean, and you can't see that shoreline for a while. And for a while, if you go really far, you can't see any shoreline, right? So the invitation of us feeling into that. And no matter what place you are in your lives, you could be in the midst of a great, massive outer transition. You can be going through a different phase of your life, right? Whether it's because the kids are leaving the house or you're entering retirement. Whatever it is that you're in, whether you've lost a loved one, these different phases of like coming into a new way of being, that perhaps the journey isn't so much about figuring out how to know, but learning how to joyfully sail in an ocean when you can't see the other shoreline, right? And that if that's truly what all of life is, maybe we could do the journey together to figuratively, symbolically hold each other's hand. Because, what's the saying that, like the hands of God? We are the hands of God, right? It's people as well as this amorphous thing. I'm going to open our time of meditation with one of my favorite quotations from A Course in Miracle. But before, I'm going to do just a very quick share about how I did a vision quest years ago, so my own sort of pilgrimage. And it was at a pivotal point when I was wondering about moving into ministry. And so I went on this vision quest, and talk about emptying. We did a fast for 3 days, and so my stomach was completely empty. And then I didn't even journal, so there was no writing, because it's all me, right? Writing, even journaling. So this process of emptying. Right before we went out onto the solo spots where we were to be alone for 3 days, just by ourselves meditating, I shared this passage with the entire group. And I'll read it now. We'll open with song, and then I'll guide us into a meditation. Be still. Be still and lay aside all thoughts of what you are and what God is. All concepts you have learned about the world. All images you hold about yourself. Empty your mind of everything it thinks is either true or false or good or bad, of every thought it judges worthy, and all the ideas of which it is ashamed. Hold on to nothing. Do not bring with you one thought the past has taught, nor one belief you ever learned before from anything. Forget this world, forget this course, and come with wholly empty hands unto your God. So I invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, and I'll guide us through this process. I invite you to drop your attention, just let it drop gently into your heart space. The heart has such capacity for knowing love. And so we begin by considering our life journey thus far. And maybe in our mind's eye, taking time, each one of us, to remember certain events that felt like grace or synchronicity, events that supported and guided us to enable us to be in the place we are today. Maybe it was the word of a friend, an unexpected encounter, a decision you made that didn't make sense at the time. Allow your heart to fill with gratitude for your choices and for the events that guided you to this moment. Are there faces of any specific persons that appear in your mind's eye? If so, send them gratitude. Sometimes it's a person who hurt us, who helped us to get here. Maybe we can also send them gratitude. Now imagine that you're standing on the shore. There's a boat in front of you and you're about to embark just on the next even day of your life, this next phase of your life. But as you stand there, you realize it's a pretty small boat and you can't carry everything that you've been carrying with you this far. In fact, the boat is so small, you really have to strip yourself of all the luggage, all your beliefs. Adopt beginner's mind. So as you prepare yourself, I invite you, best you can, as much as you're willing, to let go of all the ideas you have about life, about God, Spirit, about love, and about yourself. And imagine that an invisible hand reaches out And just, you hear without sound this idea, this thought, trust me. Trust life. And if you're willing, you take that hand and you get on the boat. What's a pilgrimage? I don't know. Where are you going? I don't know. And to whatever extent you're willing, you start to row the boat out into the ocean. With each swing of the oar, whatever you're still holding on to, maybe you're willing to let go of just one more thing that you want to be sure of. As you move out now toward this vast ocean, on your own, at the depths of your own being, here now in the silence. Now, as you're out in the midst of that ocean, see if you can take a moment to be aware of how you feel. Just checking in. And if you feel like you could use a hand to hold, what if you just opened your palm and see if you could feel how your hand is being held? How any time during this journey, when you feel anxiety or fear, that all you have to do is open your palm, empty, and feel the fullness of how you are always held. And then, as you look around the ocean, perhaps it was foggy and the fog begins to lift, and you notice you're not the only one rowing out there. And as you slowly open your eyes into the space of our room together now, you might imagine all these rowers solo in a sense, but always together. And you're never alone in life. You have people all around you journeying just like you. And if you can, if you're willing, see if you can both open your palm figuratively to them, symbolically. As a gesture both to hold their hand and to have yours be held. reaching out across the rowboat with the intimacy of opening our eyes in this space and remembering that though we each take our own journey, that we never journey alone. That in every moment is an invitation to let go of the shore, of our prior understanding, and become fully open and receptive to the new gift of love in each moment. In the forever, the always unknown territory that is life. Ever changing, always mysterious, but always filled with love. You are beloved, and so it is, and so you are. Amen.